Okay, today I wanted to talk about politics and power. This is another obviously important feature of any society. We tend to think about politics in the modern context of electoral politics like we have in our society, but it's important to realize that politics can take many, many different forms. Essentially, politics is about exercising power over other people. I mean, to be blunt about it, there is that reality. It doesn't necessarily mean wielding physical force or the threat of physical force, the threat of violence over people, but that's part of it, certainly. At the kind of at the base, the base level reality is that power is wielded by those people who have, access to uh, the ability to use force, either through being the head of a large kinship organization. So we talked about unilineal kinship last time, and being able to mobilize a large, literally an army of kinsmen. That's one way to be powerful. Um, Wielding symbols of power. Well, I'll talk more about that later. So, like with modes of production and um, lots of other features of human society, one way that anthropologists have looked at politics is through a kind of evolutionary model. And so, just like you have hunters and gatherers or foragers, usually there's a particular kind of political organization that goes along with that. So, um, nomadic or semi-nomadic foragers would tend to have societies that have relatively little in the way of political um, development. So, what I mean by that is that you would not have fixed political institutions, you wouldn't have fixed political offices. Um, the people would be much more equal. Again, it reflects also the economic reality. So there would be a high degree of equality among people. Male and female, that's another issue, the whole gender thing, and we'll talk more about that later in the semester. But so we think of hunters and gatherers or foragers mainly as being pretty egalitarian. There are some exceptions in parts of some groups in the Amazon, the Yanomami are a particularly famous example. Um, they have essentially a big man kind of society, which I'm going to talk more about here in a minute. So people do have uh, differential degrees of power. The big man does have more power than others, but it's not hereditary. Um, but many of the societies in Lowland South America and elsewhere really are just at the band level of existence. That is, they are small groups of people who are, usually related or related through marriage in some way, and they tend to be they tend to make decisions as a group. They might defer to somebody who's an expert in a particular area. So, if they want to decide, where they should go hunting next week, they probably would ask the most prominent hunter in the group advice on that, but they wouldn't necessarily have, political power. Um, So if you move up a level from band society, you get what we call tribes. There may also be, some anthropologists have argued there's something called a tribelet, which is a kind of smaller version of a tribe. And these tend to be societies that have a more institutionalized type of leadership that can range anywhere from a big man type of situation all the way up to hereditary chiefs. Um, we think of Native American societies in this context, and most Native American societies um, had chiefs, but they were not. They usually were not hereditary. So the exceptions you would find in mostly on the West Coast, as well as in some of the groups in the Southeast. Um, but you were getting to the point where you had some kind of institutional authority. These chiefs would have the ability, for instance, to declare war or to end a war. They would have the authority to, for instance, spare the lives of war captives, or on the other hand, have them tortured to death. They might make decisions about, if you're talking about one of the more nomadic groups on the plains, decisions about where and when to move. Um, these kinds of things, expelling members from the tribe. You would have all those kinds of rights and responsibilities. Um, so that's essentially, tribal organization can take a number of different forms. The thing to remember is that it does have this kind of formalized political power. Um, Chiefdoms, that's another category. Chiefdoms tend to be, as the name implies, tend to be based on hereditary chiefs. So, they are inheriting their office somehow. It's usually not simply like a father to son kind of thing, although that may be the case in patrilineal societies. It could be handed down through the matriline. It could even be handed down from, say, a father-in-law to a son-in-law. In the Northwest Coast, where they had hereditary chiefs, there was often an element of, who would make the best chief out of the possible candidates. So, you had a very flexible kinship system with the Kwakwaka'wakw, and a person who had a chiefly position to pass down might have several options. He might think about his a nephew, or you might think about a son or a son-in-law, or even a brother. So the mode of transmission was could differ depending on the situation, depending on who might be the most fit. I guess it's sort of like the Bush family trying to figure out which of their sons would make a good follow-up to President George H.W. Bush. So in any case, you have chiefdoms, and then the highest level of organization would be the state, and that tends to arise with the advent of agriculture and cities. You've got a lot of trade going on, so lo and behold, somebody invents taxes. You can't transport stuff to trade without having to buy a tax seal. The state takes a cut of the agricultural surplus. The state writes laws to regulate trade. So you think about very early examples of laws like Hammurabi's Code, which says what you do in cases ranging from theft to murder. So you do have the rise of a type of formal political structure that has coercive power over people. In previous stages, there was some degree of coercive power, but usually that would be limited at most to expulsion or ostracism, and that could happen. And depending on where you live, that could be pretty serious, or maybe it wouldn't be so serious. You just go live with a neighboring group or something. They didn't typically employ the death penalty or use violence to suppress their own people. But when you have the rise of the state, that's very much what it's about, and it's about using violence, using force to to keep people in line, to have them obey the law for one thing, but then also have them respect the power of the king or what have you, and to pay taxes. So that's sort of creating the notion of what the good citizen is in those situations. So that's kind of the trajectory that anthropologists see. Again, we're not talking real history here. We're talking about a series of kind of logical stages of development of political organization. So I wanted to talk here in the last few minutes about one of my favorite types of political formed, and probably that's the case with most anthropologists because it's a very colorful kind of thing. It's the big man. You've all heard the expression "big man," I'm sure, and it comes mostly out of Melanesia, but there are examples of it elsewhere, and including on the northwest coast, where it wasn't all just hereditary chiefs. There were aspects of kind of big man display involved. So what is a big man? Well, a big man is not somebody who was born into prominence. He wasn't a person who was born into wealth or who inherited a title. He's a person who basically is a really hard worker, is somebody who's charismatic and can persuade people to do what he wants. He's somebody who has a sense of showmanship. So he makes a big deal of certain things that add to his reputation. He's not really necessarily wealthier than other people, but he is a conduit of wealth. And what I mean by that is he doesn't sit on wealth, but he has the ability to raise wealth, at a given time in order to give it away. So that's a really key element of the big man is giving away through something like a potlatch, or as you will see in the film clip, a mocha up in the highlands of New Guinea, which is a big pig feast. So with mocha, the idea is that you have to plan pretty far ahead of time because you got to raise a certain number of pigs, and there's even like a pig financing network where you borrow some pigs from people. And think about pigs as well. They're great, but they trample gardens. They're very destructive, and it requires a lot of labor to look over them. And so for the year before having a mocha, you're trying to fatten up all these pigs, and you have really way more pigs than you would be comfortable having under normal circumstances. The pigs are probably getting into the garden, and they're creating havoc in other ways. The people who can do this usually are men who have multiple wives, you see. So the ultimate source of wealth really is family members, is wives, so they provide labor, and their children provide labor. So you have to be in that kind of situation even really to get into the game, because otherwise, the pigs are just going to, they'll probably run away, or they'll, wreak incredible damage on your gardens, and you'll be much worse off than you were to begin with. Modern mochas involve more than just pigs, though. Probably traditionally that was it. That with some traditional wealth items such as shell jewelry and things of that nature. But today, just like with the potlatch, things have become monetized, and so there's a lot of money at stake. And you see in the film that Anka has to raise a lot of money to buy a motorbike that he's going to give to the guest of honor, who happens to also be a member of the national parliament. So you see that it interlinks with a state level form of government as well. But the big man in traditional society, he was really the most highly regarded person in the society. Again, not because he was wealthy or he was entitled, but because he had this, incredible work ethic, or what one of my teachers once called the willingness to self-exploit, to exploit yourself, to work harder than you need to, and also to persuade people. Big men can't force people to do things. They can't force them to lend you pigs. They can't, or you lend them pigs. They can't force you to work in their gardens. They can't force you to do any of this stuff, but they can be persuasive. And, we all know how that is. Some people are just, kind of charming, and they're able to get other people to do what they want without the other people really feeling that they're being exploited in any way, even if, maybe they are at some level. But so the function of the big man in these types of society, it's been speculated is really to kind of enhance people's well-being, in a sense, because it's kind of forcing people to work harder than they would really like to, but it adds to the creation of surplus, which adds to food security, which would in the long run be an adaptive sort of thing. So it looks like I'm about out of time. Thanks.